what they really believe is that they know what your self-interests are better than you do.
Right.
And what they are saying is it's this elitism on the left. They're educated, they're credentialed, and so they know what your best interest is better than you. And how dare you have a different opinion than they do about what's best for the country because, who are you to question them? And then,
All right. Welcome back, guys. Today we're here with Lisa Eckman, author of a book titled Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites. Now, that's kind of it's kind of a loaded title, if you will. Like, how many Democrats do you think will actually pick up this book and read it?
yeah, I'm not sure how many will. And, thanks for having me, and I'm glad to be here. I think the idea behind the title, first I will say I wrote it when had just opened my eyes and I was just rebuilding my self-esteem and my self-image because we'll get into my background and why that was such an integral part of me. But I was a little angry and I was a little bit, which am no longer. I'm only angry in a good way now. We'll talk about that, I'm sure too. Um, but I wrote it because I think it's really important that we understand what we're really up against when we're trying
Yeah.
to help people wake up. And I should also say that I believe there are people across what we consider the political spectrum in this country who are programmed and brainwashed. But the only reason I say Democrats is because that's where I came from, and that's my experience. So I can't speak to how people who we consider to be on the right were programmed. I think a lot of them are just as programmed, but in very different ways. And so that's why I came up with that title. And because I deprogrammed myself, I was programmed, indoctrinated, and brainwashed. Those are three different things, and I think they come from three different sources, which we can kind of talk about. And I also think that they were a concerted effort to destroy our country by sowing division, divide and conquer, and using fear. And so I hope that if there are any Democrats who are starting to question the narrative, who are starting to see cracks, they might read my bio and say, you know what? She's just like I am. She was just like I am, and be able to say, now maybe I'll read this with an open mind. A lot of the brainwashed, programmed people on the left are not going to pick up this book. What I do think might happen is maybe someone that cares about them will pick up at this book and be able to say, hey, I really see my Aunt Judy in this book. I see her. Now maybe I can use the techniques Lisa lays out to help her open her mind, and reclaim her mind. That's really what I say it's about is, people who are brainwashed, their minds have been controlled. Their minds
Yeah.
have been subsumed. So when you see people just repeating talking points and they can't get below the talking point, that's a pretty good sign that their mind has been controlled. And so,
Yeah.
getting your mind back free, when you see people who will not question the narrative, who will not question the experts, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, quite a bit, coming up, that is a sign that they do not own their own mind. And so reclaiming it and freeing it is an amazing thing. Now, it's extremely hard, and we're going to talk about that too. And it's a really hard process to go through, but hardest thing I've ever done, most meaningful thing I've also probably ever done in my life. Despite having worked for Democratic senators, political appointees in Washington, D.C., big nonprofits, big government contractors, sitting in the halls in the halls of power with the voices of power, freeing my mind was probably the most important thing I feel like I've ever done. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping that the impact I leave from now forward will make what happened before I woke up insignificant in comparison. That's what I hope for and I pray for too.
Man, that's it's kind of wild because I feel the same way. So we both had like similar awakenings. Yours happened in, 2020, 2021, 2022 era. Mine, I kind of started waking up quite a bit earlier than that. So it started around 2014, 15-ish is when I started waking up, and that's because I was seeing of course, Ferguson, Missouri, there was a Michael Brown incident
Mhm.
where he was shot and killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. And when all that was taking place, I was looking at that as, oh my goodness, St. Louis is on fire. And it was very I bought the media narrative about Michael Brown and how, the hands up, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter kind of thing. I really started to question all that when it stopped making sense, right? When the Michael Brown incident was over, the police, the police officer was arrested. I don't remember what happened, but when that was all over, it didn't stop. There was riots continuing, and there was a lot of issues that when they, brought up in the mainstream media, it didn't make a whole lot of sense why people were so upset over it. And one thing that I kept hearing is we vote against our own self, or we vote against our own self-interest. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that we vote against our own self-interest. And I think that's what the problem is. I think a lot of us vote, me included, vote for our self-interests. And then we end up in a spot where we're at now, where nothing makes sense. And it's us versus them kind of thing. And when people say that we vote against our own self-interests, what they're meaning to say is that you vote against my self-interest, and I don't like you for doing that. I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Well, I'll give you a different perspective from where I came from and pepper a little more background on me so that you can understand as well as the people who are going to are watching this. So I think that a lot of the people on the left, at least, who say that about people who live in what they would call flyover country or, out the country hick or whatever
That's
it is,
me.
which I live out on a farm now, so I'm um I hope this won't upset anyone, but I'm born again country, you might say. But what they really believe is that they know what your self-interests are better than you do.
Right.
And what they are saying is it's this elitism on the left. They're educated, they're credentialed, and so they know what your best interest is better than you. And how dare you have a different opinion than they do about what's best for the country because who are you to question them? They're the experts
Right.
that have been, created. Um, so yeah, I think, and I, one of the things that I do in the book is I take a lot of responsibility for who I used to be and what I used to say. And you would have heard me saying that, all these stupid people out there, they don't know what, they're voting against their own self-interest. But, I relate this story kind of in the book too, is that they'll say something like that, but they've never taken the time to sit down and have a conversation with someone. They love to pick on trailer parks, for example. And I've met
Yeah.
some of the most amazing, nice people, who live in trailer parks, since I have woken up. And, but have they sat down and asked someone who lives in a trailer park, why do you want tax cuts for the rich? Why do you vote against these programs? Well, what they fail to understand is that most people out in the country would want to rely on their community. their family
Yes,
first, then their community, and not some money coming from Washington with all these, you know, strings attached to it,
yeah,
and that the last thing that they would ever do is want to rely on a government program
yeah,
because of their strong independence and their belief that communities and families should take care of each other, which is
absolutely.
completely lost in the huge growth in our federal government, which is way away from what our founders would have ever wanted to see in this country. Um, and so but they've never, like I've sat in a room where someone goes, "Oh, well, it's a cup of coffee, more a week." But what they fail to understand is that means maybe no dinner, in
Right.
taxes for someone for a week. What they fail to understand is the reality that most of the people in this country economically live in because they're in this bubble where, I'm doing fine,
Yeah.
and so and they don't interact in any way with people who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are, busting their butts and having trouble getting ahead.
Well,
Um,
in my experience with that, though, they don't speak to people who are living paycheck to paycheck. I don't know if that's necessarily true because a lot of the people that I know live paycheck to paycheck, but they behave as if they don't. They go to
well,
work and they like some of the people that I know drive big flashy cars but can't afford them. And a lot of the keeping up with the Joneses type thing is how we got into the predicament we're in now. Consumerism is out of control. There's a lot of things that go into that that a lot of people on the left don't even realize or don't even look at. And the reason why we are living paycheck to paycheck are some of the policies that they're voting for.
well, and I think that's a really fair point, Ricky. I think that like we put on appearances a lot of times. And social media, which I will probably come back to as a culprit for many ills that we face, is a big part of this because, yeah, I think you have two types of people who use social media. Ones that everything they show is amazing. My life is amazing. I'm great. Look at my new toy. Look at what I just bought. Look at where I'm going on vacation. Meanwhile, they may be the most miserable person in real life that you'd ever meet, but what
Yes.
you see about them is all the great things. And, we have a huge consumer debt problem. People are financing everything. I mean, I will say I voted for President Trump in 2024. But there are certain things like floating a 50-year mortgage, which I just can't, there are a lot of things he's done that I'm really happy about. There are a lot of things also that I'm going to criticize him about because that's my role, I believe, as a citizen of this country is to criticize my government when I think it's doing wrong. And, I'm no longer brainwashed to anybody. And I
Right.
will say that not all Trump supporters are brainwashed in any way, but there are a lot that I don't know what that man could do for them to utter a word in the negative about him.
Right,
And
right.
that just means
And
mine's
then they
not
don't
free.
those type of people don't understand a lot of Donald Trump's policies are left. A lot of them.
Well, he was a Democrat
Yeah,
for a very, very long time. And, I think he knew he couldn't get elected because of all the woke stuff on the left. At that point, he was way too white, way too male, and didn't check any identity box, which,
right.
I think although Biden got elected or selected or whatever word you want to use, but, I think that's really true. I guess what I would say is that the people, at least in the circles I ran in the urban left in Washington, D.C., which is a very expensive place to live and has
Yeah.
some of the, most um, uh, highly paid suburbs and highly educated people and all that. The people in those circles don't, they may be living paycheck to paycheck, but they definitely are not showing it. They're going out
Right.
for $100 meals and all of that without even batting an eye because that's just part of what you do when you live in Washington.
Right.
But they certainly, haven't met a lot of people who are not living lavishly and are suffering paycheck to paycheck. And, I mean, I think part of this is that we've been so, um, I don't know, uh, manipulated to not pay attention to what has really happened to working people in this country.
Amen.
We sold a bill of goods to young people that if you go to college, you're going to be fine. And Obama did this, right? Obama was like, everybody
Yeah.
needs to go to college. Well, now, when I graduated college, I'll say the year because I give my birth year in the book. So, and I'm not one of those women or people who cares about my age that much. But when I graduated college in 1991, if you had a college degree, you were going to do all right.
Yeah.
You I think would use your degree a little bit more often than you do now in
Yeah.
what people do. It's very rare that you meet someone, oh yeah, I have a marketing degree and I do marketing or whatever it is now. Or obviously I have a gender studies degree and I don't know what it is you're supposed to do with that, but that's a whole other
Right.
story. But now we have so many colleges that, like, I literally say their degrees are not worth the paper that they're printed on. And these young
Amen.
people were sold a bill of goods. And education system is a huge part of the problem. It's an indoctrination
Yes.
system, and college especially. If you're in what I would call the soft, the humanities or not the hard sciences, because this is a little bit different, but over 90% of your professors are going to be Democrats. And I would say at least half of those are going to be like far left, fringe lefties who took
I like
over.
to call those people communists,
Yeah, I would too. They're
even though it's probably not the correct term, like because like we all live in a capitalist system, we all love capitalism, even regardless of whether we want to admit it or not. Like I'm capitalist all the way. I love free market capitalism, and I think a lot of people get confused on what like free market capitalism is, like minimum wage and workers' rights and regulations and all that stuff. Like, if you take away a lot of that stuff and you bring in free market capitalism, true free market capitalism, and people move around, like say this employer over here doesn't treat you right, right? Instead of forming a union, why don't you all quit and go somewhere else? And the United States is
or
so large now that we can actually do that.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I was going to say jokingly when you first said free market capitalism, gee, I wish we had that around here. I wish we had some of that.
Right.
We've gotten so far away from that. Like it's amazing to me. I'm going to use this example because it's crazy to me. Like I live, not very far from a dairy farm and a beef farm and all of the farms, and if I want to drink raw milk and I want to buy raw milk from my neighbor, why should the government have anything to say about it? If my
Right.
neighbor sells me dirty milk, I mean, I could go into a whole thing about the fact that raw milk is actually way healthier for you. You're much less likely to catch an infection. I could actually go because I have had raw milk for a very long time. I could actually go and look at the conditions in which my milk is being produced, take a tour of the farm, talk to the farmer. And there are some farmers I would say, I'm not going to buy milk from you because I don't really like the way you're treating your cows, or I don't really think that's sanitary. But we are so far removed from the actual transaction at this point. And, so much of what happened too is that we buy from these huge companies who their main focus is shareholder returns and not customer satisfaction. I'm no fan of, Amazon. I'll just say. I have an Amazon Prime because
Get me too. I use them,
how
but I can't stand them either.
how wouldn't you? I mean, and there's so many things I like when I moved to the farm, I'm like, oh, I'll go to the local farm store and pick up a soil thermometer. Well, they don't carry it. So I have to buy it from China, through Amazon. And there's no accountability for any of the sellers on Amazon. We were buying some farm equipment and uh it breaks. Everything's made to break. That's
Yeah.
another part of the consumerism that you're talking about. And by the time it broke, which was maybe 6 months after we bought it, that Chinese company no longer even existed on Amazon. So it was like, what are you supposed to do about that? But that is part of the whole thing is that people have outsourced their responsibility to the government for everything.
Hey, there we go. That's yes. The
So the
bigger the
government needs to protect me. The government needs to make sure that this farm is safe. The government needs to this, and that.
And now it's the government needs to feed me. The government needs to house me. The government needs to do this, do that. And the bottom line is like you never hear anybody say, I need to do this or we need to do that. It's the government needs to do this. And then the policies come and then everybody gets and it's a giant mess. And I am with you there. Like a lot of people don't understand bureaucracy because they don't see it. And you lived in Washington for years and you understand what bureaucracy is. How I explain it to people is okay, do you know the place where you work? And they say, yeah. Okay. Do you work in the office? Oh, no. Okay. Do you know anybody that does work in the office? Oh, yeah, 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 sure. Okay. So when they go have meetings, what they're actually having a meeting about is having a meeting about having a meeting about having a meeting about changing a rule, and then nothing gets done. Ultimately, your meetings are full of an hour long talking about other meetings that you're going to have about stuff that you're wanting to change or need to change, and it ultimately takes 3 years for those changes to happen, which is what like 4 years was long enough of a term for a US president to serve to get things done, 50 years ago. Not anymore. And that's a problem. Term limits are great in a sense, but when the government is so large that they can't get anything done within those term limits that affect any real change, then it becomes a big problem. And we start running into people who then want to turn our government into a dictatorship or a fascist state. And it's intolerable to me. I can't even have a conversation with these type of people because they refuse to look or understand any other way but their own.
Well, they can't because they are programmed and they are brainwashed and they only one of the things, and I'm going to speak to the left here. I find it somewhat different on the right again, and that isn't where I come from. And again, I reject that dichotomy. What I think we have is uh, two wings on the same bird. They're the establishment. Left one gets to flap for a while. Look over here, look over here. Right one gets to flap for a while. Look over here, look over here. And meanwhile, they don't want anything to change that would take away any of their power. And meanwhile, we get to be like basically the newspaper on the bottom of the bird cage. And that's what we get is,
Yeah,
let the
yeah.
crap that flows down from them as they rob our treasury, as they become multimillionaires with insider trading and all of the things and directing contracts back to people they, know in their district or their state. And I think for me, one of the things that is important is going back to foundational principles,
Yes.
and what does, I find that most young people have no idea what freedom is, have absolutely no idea what it means to be free. And in some ways, I'll be honest, it's really scary to be free because then you're responsible for everything.
It's
You're
really expensive
responsible.
too.
Oh, it's very expensive. But, I have this subsection in one of the chapters of the book, and I think it's on what the evolution of the progressive cult, how the left got to be what it is. And it's entitled Entitlement, um, Victimhood, and Accountability. And what we see is that people are being programmed and indoctrinated in school to believe they're entitled to something that somebody else produces, that they are always the victim, that, I can't succeed because someone else or something else did this to me. Even though there are people who are very much like you who seem to have been able to succeed, and we can talk about that more. And then that people don't want to be accountable for what they do. Oh, I relate this example. So I had someone here working on something at my house, and he ran a small business, and he had employees who did repairs with him. And he related this story to me. He said, "Yeah, last Friday I had this one of my young employees. He left in the middle of the shift, didn't tell me what he was doing or ask me or anything. This was on a Friday. Don't hear from him Saturday. Don't hear from him Sunday. Monday he shows up like he's going to work." And I immediately, of course, fired him on the spot, and he didn't seem to understand why, because he left all his coworkers in a lurch, but that's called being accountable for the choices that you make. And and
Absolutely.
the and the owner of the business, he was like, I'm pretty flexible. If he would have said, "Hey, I if he had an actual reason, someone's sick, I'm sick, or I need to go help out somebody for some reason, as opposed to maybe I want to go to the bar with my friend." I don't know what the kid was doing, but he's like, if he'd at least talked to me or even called over the weekend or something, I would have maybe not fired him. But then, of course, he's going to probably, I'm a victim,
Yeah.
doesn't understand why he got fired. So, that is challenging. And I think though, I also want to be fair and say that a lot of young people, the reality they've grown up in is
Yeah.
not the reality that I grew up in. Like it used to be during my childhood and early adulthood, one person could work in the family, mom could stay home, you could have a good life, own a home, have a car, go on a vacation or two, eat decently, and not be concerned all the time about are my lights getting turned off.
It's still
Also,
possible. It is still possible to live like that. Man, just to give you a little bit of background on me, I'm a stay-at-home dad. Well, I'm more of a homemaker now than a stay-at-home dad because my kids are in school. But so my kids are in public school right now. I'm getting ready to pull them out. So this stay-at-home dad thing is going to come back. But I tell people all the time, like, you can live on one income. Usually, it just has to be a high income. My wife is an HR professional, and she makes good money, not great money, but
I call those the medium bucks. That's what I
yeah,
used to make. Medium bucks.
yeah,
Enough, but not a lot. Yeah.
right, right. And so they like we some prior to COVID, we went to actually prior to the war breaking out in Ukraine, we used to go on vacation 3 or 4 times a year. And while we didn't own a house at that time, we do now, and we were working our way towards that. We would go on vacation 3 or 4 times a year. Sometimes, like I live in Missouri, sometimes we'd end up in Florida. We go to Disney World or we go to Universal Studios, and people would ask, even one of my siblings would, "How the hell do you guys do that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? I it's pretty cheap. Like we sit and plan this stuff out, and the fun part comes with the planning and how to do all this with this kind of money and all that." And they were like, "Oh no, I have that kind of money. I still can't afford to go out." I value things differently.
Mhm.
My whole family values things differently. Now, we're not thinking about retirement when we go, down to Florida and hang out down there. What we're thinking of is providing memories for our kids and hanging out together and doing family stuff. And we'll worry about retirement when it gets here because that's the way we grew up. I grew up poor and I still have, I grew up with nothing and I still have most of it left, kind of thing.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I um made a choice that a lot of women my age, and I see way too many young women, and part of why I'm speaking out is I hope that they'll make a different one, is I chose not to have children. And I chose to focus on my career with now when you don't have kids, kind of think about who's going to take care of me if I get sick when I get older, although that's not going to happen. I'm not going to need that positive thing we were talking about
Right.
prior to the starting recording. Um, but the truth of it is that nobody is promised tomorrow. Like
Absolutely.
nobody is promised anything in the future. And so, one of the things for me is I've found my own faith since I woke up, and it's very much my own, and I have my own relationship with the creator. Um, and part of doing that was letting go of fear. Part of that fear controls so much for people, and it's how most people, especially on the left, who don't have any spirituality or no religious faith of any kind,
Right.
um, are controlled is through that fear and identity politics and things like that. But letting go of fear and recognizing that if you're sad, you're living in the past. If you're afraid, anxious, any of those things, scared, um, unless something actually scary is happening to you at that moment, you're living in the future. And
Yeah.
the only thing that you really have is the present. And
That's right.
um, and it is, I like to say the present is a present from the creator. And that present is only good for the moment that you get it.
Right.
So if you waste it thinking about, oh, what's going to happen tomorrow, or now, that doesn't mean you don't plan for things or you don't plan out a nice vacation. You can be really happy in the moment while you're planning something positive for the future. But if you are worrying and, stressing over something that hasn't happened yet, um, first of all, you might make it more likely to happen because you're
Right.
stressing out about it. But also, like, you've wasted the moment. You've wasted
Yeah.
that precious present that you had. And I'm terrible at this, I should say. I'm not trying to preach at anyone about it. A big part of the way that I was controlled and programmed and brainwashed was through fear. And I
Yes.
always was afraid, if what happens if I can't work? What happens if I don't have enough? And so that, is very challenging to let go of. But I also like to say you can only hold love or fear in your heart. You can't hold them both in your heart at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you get to choose, are you going to hold love in your heart? Or are you going to let fear dictate how you feel and how you're going to treat other people? And um,
I
it's
say something very similar. I say life's too short to have hate in your heart. And that's true. When you hate someone, it taxes you more than it taxes them. Letting go of things is ultimately the best thing you could do for your mental health and your physical health.
100%. And one of the things I found with people on the left and myself very much included, and one of the things I do in the book is that I speak from my own experience a lot, and I take responsibility for how I was. But two concepts that, again, when you have religion, I think these are imbued more in you. And it doesn't have to be organized religion, but when you have that faith, it's gratitude and
Yeah.
forgiveness. And those two things a lot of people do not have. If you are grateful for what you have, like I walk outside and I now in the morning, we have chickens on our farm, and my first duty after putting the pot of coffee on is to go and let the chickens out and feed them and water them and whatever. And I do my best every day, no matter what happened the day before, no matter how bad I slept, no matter what I have in front of me, on the day, whether I want to do it all or I think I have to do some of it, is to recite to myself what I am grateful for, you know,
I love
and
that.
I'm grateful for the sun on my face. I'm grateful for these chickens, because no matter what eggs cost at the store, I'm gonna eat my own eggs and I know what those chickens ate and how they got treated and that they got sun and all those things. And despite the fact that, we have five crazy dogs that drive us crazy sometimes, they're amazing. And I'm grateful for those dogs. And I'm grateful for my partner. And I'm grateful that I'm able to walk. I had, um, uh, I, I think I fully ripped ligaments in my ankle a couple of months
Wow.
ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It was challenging. Um, and then I remind myself I'm grateful I'm walking. I'm grateful that I am, and now that it's pretty much healed. I
But see,
did a
Lisa,
lot.
this is something that you have to think about, right? You have to think about sustaining yourself and what if something happens and you have to prepare for that. A lot of people are not preparing and they start like so forgive me when I say this, the boomer generation is one of the softest generations I've ever met. And it's because they think they're hard. And the difference is like a lot of the boomers that I know are like, me, I, and they don't think about other people or other things. And one specific example stands out in my mind that we were just talking about this. You had mentioned this, like, who's going to take care of me when I get old? Well, the way I feel about it is it's not my kids' responsibility to take care of me when I get old. It's not my grandkids' responsibility. It's mine. And it always has been mine. I'm responsible for myself. Now, my kids, I've got four children, ranging in ages from 22 down to 6. So I'm good. My kids are going to be here for a while, but I don't want to burden them with my problems. I want them to have their own families, and that's what I'm really raising. We're trying to raise a little community here, but with accountability and responsibility of yourself, and that's how we think about things. Like generally most people do think about having children um to further their bloodlines or whatever, but once the kids are there, sometimes they do start thinking about, well, who's going to take care of me when I get old and this and that. But you out there on the farm, you have to prepare for emergencies. You have to put like your ankle, you couldn't walk, you were out of commission, so um, you had to figure out in real time how to take care of the chickens, how to get the eggs, how to take care of the other animals, how to mow the grass, how to do this, how to do that, all while you can't walk on that one ankle. And so in that preparation, you're kind of preparing yourself to get old. And
Yeah.
that's a lot of things, like people don't do that anymore. And I've been preparing to get old since I was knee high to a grasshopper, because I see my grandparents got old, my parents got old. Eventually I'm going to get old too. And my house, for instance, one of the reasons we decided to go ahead and buy the house that we live in now is because it's all on one level and it's wheelchair accessible. So if we end up in financial dire straits and cannot move, or we end up being stuck here for the rest of our lives, we'll be okay. I'll be able to live here, and my house is handicapped accessible. I've got enough land I can grow a garden and be self-sustaining. But people don't think about self-sustaining, especially people in cities.
Oh, that's for sure. And that's part of why I moved out to a farm from DC, once I woke up. And I think this is a good time to sort of relate back to my waking up, because I did have some things happen around the same time that you started waking up, Ricky, that helped me to wake up. Although I had to sort of pigeonhole what I'm about to tell you about in my brain, because I had to go back to work. And,
Yeah.
I did mostly disability policy advocacy. So, and if you want to talk about a very woke community, that would be right in the heart of it. It's one of those identities that is very woke. And then it using sort of the concept, which you may or may not have heard of. I don't know if this is filtered all the way out, but intersectionality, that like, oh yeah, okay. So it's basically like, if you were to think about me and my existence, you would say that's a woman who is white, who is also this, that, and the other. So, you might be, well, you can't understand me if you don't look at all of my different identities that intersect one another. And so, if you're a person with a disability who's Black, who's gay, who's or queer, they all intersect. And so you can't
Yeah.
just focus on one. And so I was in the middle of all of that, doing my work. But when the hardest thing I ever went through in my life before my awakening was losing both of my parents within 2 years of each other. And my dad got very sick. Well, at the end of 2008, he started having trouble walking, and he had really bad spinal stenosis in his neck. So he had to have surgery, and then he had a bunch of catastrophic complications after that surgery, which left him functionally quadriplegic and in adrenal failure. And so then my mom became his primary caregiver, and she had already had multiple sclerosis. But he needed help with pretty much everything. And my parents were in good financial shape compared to a lot of people. But this was very financially taxing because my mom had to hire help, and there wasn't any help for her. And so he lived about 5.5 years after that, and they were very hard. And but and that was really hard to lose him. But then my mom, while she was caring for him, got diagnosed with stage 4 of an extremely aggressive cancer. And she was told, by the doctor, you should maybe get your affairs in order. You may have a couple of months, to live. And so she came to me and she said, Lisa, I'm going to do the conventional treatment, which in retrospect, I wish she had not, but with
Yeah.
what I know now. But if there's anything else I can do, I'll do it. So would you do some research for me? And I'm going to try. I want to be here. I want to see my grandson graduate from college. I want to see these things. I want to be here. And so I said, sure, I'll do some research. And the first thing I told her is not to do any herself because it's just going to depress you. And one of the most important things for you, Mom, is that you have to believe you're going to survive. You can
Yeah.
beat this. So I did some research. I found a couple of really great books that I would recommend to anyone who might be looking at, a battle against cancer. And one focused almost exclusively on nutrition, how to arm your body with what it needs to fight whatever is going on, the toxicity in your body that is manifesting. And the other one focused on nutrition too, but also sort of the mental and emotional and spiritual aspects of beating cancer. And so, how are you dealing with stress? What are you doing with the emotional toxicity that you're facing? And so, we got my mom to a naturopath. We got her changed everything she put in her body, on her body, cleaned her house with. We did guided meditation. We did focused breathing. We did stress reduction techniques. And so my mom got surgery, and then she started a round of chemotherapy, which was 6 treatments. And by after the third treatment, they did a round of tests. They did scans again, which why are we irradiating people who have cancer? But that's a whole other story. But and they did, the blood test for the tumor marker. Every cancer has some blood test they can do a marker test. Well, after 3 treatments of chemo, she was cancer free. No evidence of cancer in her body. And her doctor was amazed. He's like, I've never seen this before. This is a miracle. I don't know what, keep it up. He was also the same doctor that when I asked after she had a blood issue that she was in the hospital, hey, I have her organic food. Is there any way I can get it to her? Because literally what you eat in the hospital will kill you. But that's also a whole other story. And he was like, no, it doesn't matter what she eats. So that tells you what his mindset was.
Right.
Luckily, there was a lovely nurse who said, I'll put it in the nurse's fridge and get it to her. And so she did. But, my mom lived cancer free for 2 years, completely cancer free. Then they did another scan and a tiny little growth appeared. And the doctor was like, we're going to, give you chemo, but this time we're going to do it, even amp the chemo up. And one chemo treatment fried her kidneys and she died of kidney failure.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I'm so sorry to hear about your mom.
thank you.
I it's funny because like I learned a lot. I've heard you refer to the healthcare system as the sick care system. Um, I learned a lot of valuable lessons, and I went through a lot of things because of my mom's medical history and her medical experiences. My mom, so I'm a self-diagnosed hypochondriac. I think I'm dying like all the time. And I think it's hereditary. I think my mom was that way too. And she chose to see doctors. I choose to just be the way that I am. And like, obviously, if it's something serious, I'll go seek a doctor. But for every little ache and pain, or, my knees hurt today or whatever, like I'm getting old, and that's part of getting old is hurt and pain. And that's essentially how I know I'm alive. I don't seek out treatments to eliminate pain. I manage it. I do things. I'm like a homeopathic type of person. Um, I not that I believe in like all the woo woo homeopathic remedies and all that stuff. It's just like natural remedies work better than, in my opinion, they work better than the medical. I think the sick care system was designed just to make money. I think that's all it is.
Well, I agree with you. I've come to that conclusion, and I feel like part of the reason why, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and MAHA is being so resisted, if I were to tell you that $1 in $5 that our GDP comes from people being sick, would that surprise you?
And
Our
it would
our
actually it would surprise me. I'm surprised it's not higher.
Well, I'm just using official statistics, and that, I'm not sure exactly what that includes. It's probably higher, but if people were actually healthy, our economy would fall apart. I mean, all the jobs, taking care of people who are very sick, um, all of the money that's being recycled through all of the pharmaceuticals and all of that. And I learned a lot about that with my mom, and it started to really create some cracks in the dam, as I call it, of that held back the flood of truth from me about the fact that our regulatory agencies have been completely captured by industry. And all they do is circle people through. Like, you're an expert because you run this drug company, so you're going to run the FDA. And
Yeah,
then you get to approve all these drugs but then you get to go back to that drug company and make billions of dollars of profit off of.
yeah.
Um, and so, but I had to like kind of pigeonhole that and put it in the back of my mind because I went back to work with those very agencies. But, it's things like, what the heck is the USDA doing with their food pyramid? It makes absolutely no sense. Like, one of the things that's really clear, and it's not the only source of food, but cancer's favorite source of food is sugar, you know, but I mean, everything has sugar in it
Yeah.
practically in our
Yeah.
processed diet. Everything does. And so I pigeonholed all of that, but it sort of created the environment in my brain where there were those questions pushed way back into the attic, but they were in there going, why? And after I read all this stuff, I changed everything I ate. I changed everything, I clean with. I
Hell
filtered
yes.
my
Hell yes.
water. Because once you read this stuff, you can't unlearn it, and
Exactly.
you can't
Exactly.
unsee
Like
it.
we're making our own bread here at home, right? And it kind of started is because like uh honestly it really started because of RFK Jr. And I love that guy as crazy as he is. I love him. Mainly because he number one, he got the conversation started, right?
Oh
Um
yeah.
and I believe in a lot of things he says. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I have autism, and my youngest son has level 2 autism. And so these policies that are being created, or some of these issues that Robert F. Kennedy has espoused about vaccines, about the food we eat, and environmental causes to autism, and all the hate that he gets because of it. I'm like, at least he's looking, at least he's interested in finding the problem and rooting it out. Now, I don't think that they want to kill me. I don't think that they want to round me up and put me in concentration camps and poke and prod me. I don't believe that. I simply don't believe that. I just think that for, since the 50s, they've been pumping this food into us in in uh, in an effort to make food more available. I think is what it started as. And grocery stores, I feel completely different about grocery stores now for the same reason. Is I go into the grocery store and I see 50 products on the shelf of the 50 different variants of the same thing, and I'm forced to stand there and choose which one do I want. When, prior to, let's say, the 40s and 50s, we would, go out to our garden and figure out which food we want to eat today. And man, the processed bullshit that we put in our bodies today. You speak about cancer. I think that's where a lot of it comes from, is because everything that we consume is processed bullshit. We don't have any real food anymore. The beef that we eat is, the chicken that we eat is, all the eggs that we eat are messed with. All these things that people don't understand, going to the grocery store just to have it on the shelf causes problems. All the preservatives. When I was telling somebody about, like, we make our own bread here at home, it's three ingredients. Four ingredients if you count the yeast. Um, it's four ingredients. And you go to the store and you pick up a loaf of bread and you read the ingredients. There's like 50 ingredients on a loaf of bread, and you can squeeze it and it bounces right back into shape. You don't have to worry about crushing your bread anymore because it bounces back into shape after being crushed. Um, the preservatives, the amount of preservatives that they put in bread is crazy. The bread that we make here at home, if it's still on the counter after 3 days, it gets tossed out because it's no good anymore. And you go and buy a loaf of bread at the store, you look at it 3 weeks later, and it might still be edible.
Oh, more than 3 weeks, 100%. We bake our own sourdough here too. I mean, we do the sourdough. And here's a good thing. If it's on your counter after 2 or 3 days, make some croutons out of it or make your own
There
bread.
you go.
That's what I do. Trying not to waste, because I also get my flour from a mill that I know how it's grown, and I mean, and that's the thing. It takes effort, and quite frankly, it's really expensive to eat well if you're not growing everything yourself. Now,
Kinda. I don't think so. Like here in the Midwest, like everything that we eat it's obtainable. Like we can go right across the river to Kansas and get some wheat. Like living in farm country, like everything that we eat can be sourced locally. It's crazy. Like we don't think like that at the grocery store when we go in and picking things out, like pickles, for instance. You don't have to buy a jar of pickles. You just have to buy a jar, put some cucumbers in it, and make the pickles yourself.
I have
So,
an entire refrigerator of pickled peppers and cucumbers that I grew
yes,
in my garden and that I make myself. And I like the spicy garlic ones. And so I grow spicy, peppers, jalapenos or cayenne or whatever. But I should have said if you live in a city,
yeah,
it's very expensive to do it. It's very challenging. It takes extra time. Like, even though you can go into Kansas and get your wheat, you got to have the time to drive into Kansas. I know it's
right.
not that far in some places, but
But
it's
you're in
just,
Virginia, so like it is pretty far for you.
yeah, no, actually, I mean, I live in pretty rural area, so I get my most of my meat. There's one farm that I get my chicken from that's 10 minutes away. Because we only do eggs, we don't raise meat and process our own chickens here. Although we do have dual purpose birds that if, all everything went to crazy, we could. Although that would be a step we haven't taken yet. But
You're
and
like
then
eating your pets.
well, I stopped naming the chickens because not we had a fox issue and we've had issues, and you don't want to get that attached to them, and especially when you start having so many of them. There's something called chicken math. Once you start getting chickens, somehow they just multiply. You don't know how it happens, but you start with six, now you have 12 and what have you. But I think that we have, especially as someone who lived in the city, people get so disconnected from where their food actually even comes from. And we have gotten so spoiled, because we feel like we should be able to get any produce any time of year. And, I took this class last year at a farm nearby that's their regenerative um, herb, and they do, we're actually getting our turkey for Thanksgiving from them, and they do chickens, eggs, and very small scale beef, and it was an herbal medicine class. So I know how to grow my own herbs, and I could, tell you if you're having this inflammation, try this herb. I make tinctures, I dry things for tea, I do all these things, right? She put together a cookbook. It's a seasonal cookbook. So both in terms of detoxing and using only what's grown during that season, that's the way the cookbook is written. And that's the way we used to eat. But now we want a pineapple in December, or whatever it is. And pineapples don't even grow here, let alone, that time of year. But so it's just we've gotten in such a crazy way of thinking and so disconnected from our food. And I really think of food as medicine, and I really think of it that way. When I hurt my ankle, I was 99% sure I didn't break a bone. So I never went to the doctor. I mean that you know what they're going to tell you, but they're also going to try to make you take drugs. They're going to try to
Yes.
make you take anti-inflammatories. Which 100% I will not take. I will use a natural anti-inflammatory, but I will not take theirs because when your body gets inflamed, when your body runs a fever, that is your natural healing process. Now, if your fever goes way up, you do need to do something to make sure that you don't, burn your organs. But a fever of 101, you should ride that because your
Yeah.
body is addressing what is going on. And so the other thing though that's so important, and I'm trying to remember, I can't remember the name of this scientist, but is vitamin belief is what he calls it. And he says it's the most important vitamin you can have. And it's that belief we were talking about. I'm going to heal. I'm going to get better. I'm going to be better. And the first thing a doctor is going to tell you is all the things that can go wrong, right? If you don't heal this, this is going to happen. You're going to be in pain forever. You're going to have chronic pain, this, that, and the other. And it's going to take you this long to get better. Well, I did not go to the doctor for my ankle. And within 2 months, I was walking on it, carrying things, bending, all the things. I'm still very careful with it. 3 to 6 months minimum is what they would have told me. But
Yeah.
because that didn't get in my head, I was like, I'm going to kick this. It's going to be, no problem. And I understand why people go to the doctor often, but I also think that it does create negative. And by the way, this is not health advice. I'm not giving you, I'm not a doctor. I'm not,
Yeah,
just
this is just a conversation between
just a
two people.
conversation between two people, not health advice for anyone, but um I think it is really it makes a big difference. But I also had an amazing herb that does great things for when you're healing. And I created a poultice and put it on there. And it really helped speed up the healing. And as much as it was the actual chemical process that the herb does, it was also my belief that it would. So
Yeah, yeah. I actually found it a different tactic that works pretty well. Um, I kept running. So when I stopped working, I actually tried to go for disability, and I actually could have, I needed it at that time. Now I don't. The thing was, like, I had to fight for it, and I had to go to the doctors and prove this and prove that. And I'm like, I was 500 pounds, and I was like, listen, guys, I can't move anymore. And I couldn't get anybody to take me serious, it seemed. But the day that I told the doctor that I had an issue with taking medications, and I don't want to take painkillers because I'm becoming addicted. So I switched tactics and told them, "Oh, I'm an addict. I can't take your pills." And once I told them, like, I'm an addict and I can't take your pills, they started treating me. Actually treating the issue instead of trying to cover it up. Here, take the pills and report back to us in 2 weeks. It stopped being like that. They started taking me seriously. And the same thing recently happened. I just got into a car accident, and it says in the chart that I refused painkillers. And it wasn't that I refused the painkillers, like, they were not listening to me. So I was like, when they offered, I was like, I can't take those. I have an addiction issue. As soon as I said that, they started treating me differently. They started treating the problems that I had instead of trying to cover them up.
yeah, and that is a big difference. It's here we're not going to try to address the issue. We're going to manage your symptoms, and that's
Yes.
what most pharmaceuticals are. And then most pharmaceuticals then create other issues that need to be
Yes.
symptoms to be managed, especially around your liver, your kidneys that are responsible for detoxing you from the poison, the pharmaceutical poison. I'm sorry, I'm being strong about that, but I truly believe a lot of it is very poisonous to us.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. And
you know,
it started so many issues with addiction and drugs. Like, we have a fentanyl crisis right now. And how much of those fentanyl addicts actually got started with heroin, and they got started with heroin because they were addicted to pharmaceuticals. I really honestly think there's a lot of addicts out there that are in active addiction right now because of pharmaceutical companies.
oh, I 100% agree with you. And I also think, you know, we think of pain meds as the only addiction, but what about all the people on SSRIs and antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs and all of that? I did want to circle back to something you said about RFK Jr. and
Yeah.
autism. One of my most frustrating experiences working as a disability advocate was around the autism advocacy. Because here's what they did, I think. They took people who are quirky, maybe really smart, and they grouped them in with people who are extremely brain damaged from what I think is vaccines and
That's
other
me.
things. What? You're the quirky one?
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
I didn't find out I have autism until I was 40. And the reason why I went to go find out anyway is because my son has a more severe form of autism. And so I went to the doctor and I was like, well, he had to get it from somewhere, you know. Um, and so they did, their battery of tests on me, come back, I have autism. And I've I never, it never crossed my mind before I had my youngest son, never even thought about it. But I have been different from everybody that I know for a very long time. And it gave me an identifier that I can look back on a lot of things in my life and say, wow, that makes sense now. But other than that, it really didn't help me to find out. Like, if anything, it gave me an excuse to be an asshole.
Which I get, and I just think, there used to be something called Asperger's syndrome, and that
Yeah.
was to live where, and I tried to impart on them, look, I'm not talking about you. I'm not trying to fix you. Because there's this thing in the disability community that we're perfect the way that we are. You don't need
Yeah.
to fix us. And I said, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the 16-year-old who's in diapers and will be for their entire life, who's banging their head against the wall, self-injurious and non-communicative. And I am sorry, that is not the same as you. And trying to help them and their families. Some of the most heartbreaking things I see are mothers who are like, I can't anymore because
Yeah.
he can hurt me and he
Yeah.
is hurting his siblings. And I love him, but, you know, and nobody wants that for their child. But if I were to say we need to find a cure for autism, everybody would say, you're not fixing me, I'm fine. Because of
Yeah.
course, the advocates that I was working with in the autistic community were, and they would hate that I'm going to say this, and they were the high functioning ones. They're the
Yeah.
ones that have what would have been Asperger's. So I agree. I'm really glad that RFK Jr. is having the conversation. I wish, and maybe I'll make sure I make this known, the first thing he would do is separate those people who are the ones that he is talking about, the
Yeah.
ones who will never have any semblance of a normal life, will never be able to care for themselves, who I do think it is a toxic overload of different things, between vaccines, um, toxic formula. Like the very first ingredient in most baby formulas is high fructose corn syrup,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And I
So,
think that we use that a lot. Like here in the United States, it's a sugar substitute. And I think high fructose corn syrup is actually a cause of a lot of issues, that we've barely scraped the surface on how many issues high fructose corn syrup causes, because it's in everything. And I pointed this out to my wife about 20 years ago. We were walking through the store and I told her, oh, the price of corn is up. And she said, well, how do you know that? I said, well, the price of soda went up. And I'm a massive soda addict. So like I knew what the price of soda was. I paid attention to that. And she's like, the price of soda went up. And I said, well, if you look around at the prices, you'll notice on the things that you buy, like, the price goes up, a few cents every week. That's the price of corn. And she said, how do you know that? And I said, because I'm smart. Corn is in everything. It's like I picked up a box off the shelf and I said, read the ingredients on there. There's corn in that. And she's like, really? And I was like, corn is in everything. And the reason why that's what we feed our cattle, right? And like we have become our government's cattle.
oh, we definitely have. My partner Jamie, which I'll circle back to my awakening now because he's a big part of it. He even said this. He's like, the New York Stock Exchange. Well, what is a stock exchange? It's where they sell cattle. And basically, financiers are exchanging our futures of
Yep.
workers as the cattle. And yeah, I mean, so much has gone wrong with industrial agriculture. We grow two crops mainly. We grow corn and soybeans.
Yes,
And
yes. I
I
talked about
mean,
that this summer. I was like, okay, so the tariffs, right? They really messed with the farmers in the area. And I'm like, let's just grow something else. And it's that's not a solution for this season, obviously, but you're right. When I live in Missouri, it's farms everywhere, all around me. I live in the city, but there's all around my city is farms, and they have two crops: it's corn and soybeans, and we don't need either one. And most of the corn that's grown is feed corn. And it doesn't make any sense why we have fields and fields and fields of feed corn because it's not going to the United States. We're not using it here. We're exporting it. And which is why the soybean farmers had such a huge problem this year is because the number one purchaser of soybeans in the world is China, and China stopped buying soybeans. The soybean farmers were pissed off the president. And I'm like, listen, it's for your own good. Grow something else. And they just don't get it. Now, one of the things that pissed me off about this whole shutdown thing and the end of it was something that they snuck in to the bill was hemp derived THC. They want to outlaw that. And it goes all the way back to the 2018 Farm Bill. And the reason why I was so concerned about it is I grow my own pot, and it's fantastic therapeutic, just the growing it. And forget about the smoking it, but growing it is awesome and it's so therapeutic. And I was worried that I might not be able to get seeds. Now that's not the case, but there's a $1 billion industry that's going to have to close because of something the politician may or may not even agree with, but just stuck it in there. And I think it has a lot to do with alcohol. And you'll never convince the people in power that all they want is power. You'll never convince them to really think about um, what their policy decisions do to the community, like the country at large. And I think there's a term that I've heard recently. It's called suicidal empathy.
mhm.
And I see that a lot on the left. They think it goes back to, thinking what is they know what's best for us better than we do. And it's not, they don't think of it that way. They just need something to feel guilty about because their lives are so good, or, these people over here have it so bad that we need to do something. And it's like, no, stay in your lane. But back to what you were saying.
Yeah, I think, I'll add something there. And I think, what has happened a lot on the left, and I've already turned my feminist card in, so I don't worry about what I'm about
I
to say.
did too.
But because a big problem that we have is with liberal women like I used to be, uh who are willing to sacrifice their daughters in, sports and rooms because of these poor trans people. Um, and I have a lot of compassion for people who are so messed up in the head that they think that they are supposed to be the wrong sex. I have a lot of compassion for them, but it will not, at this point, I will not
It's
uh,
not going to help
go
them to
against
play.
reality, and it doesn't help
Yes,
them. And it does not
it's
help someone with mental illness to feed into their delusion. It actually makes them worse. And I care about them, but they have been convinced that there are only certain people who deserve their compassion, and that those are the historically oppressed or the vulnerable or that kind of thing. And then that compassion is manipulated using fear and weaponized into anger. And that's
and
what you see
at
all the
that point,
time.
the oppressed become the oppressors.
Well, yeah, you don't correct historical wrongs by creating new ones.
Right,
Discrimination does not fix past discrimination.
right.
And I think a lot of these women of my age and younger especially, I think and the boomers too. I'm not going to leave them out. But if we did not have children, that mothering compassion, that nurturing needs to go somewhere. And so
Yes.
put it onto the other people's children and other vulnerable groups. And then we can be manipulated into just about anything. Because we now have selective suicidal empathy. So we're only going to have that empathy for the people we've been programmed to believe deserve it. And
Yeah.
then we are going to take it to the extreme because we believe it's literally life and death. And they've done this with everything. So a lot of trans people believe there's a trans genocide going on,
Yeah,
right?
the people that don't like that term genocide is thrown around so much these days. It irritates the piss out of me because I'm like, okay, there, the last genocide that the biggest genocide that I know of, like, I mean, I'm sure there's been bigger ones, but the Holocaust during World War II, um, that was a genocide, and like what is happening right now inside of Israel and Gaza, not a genocide. So, but that word gets thrown around a lot as well as the Nazi and communist and capitalist. All these words are starting to not mean anything anymore because people throw them around so much.
Yeah, and I would just point out that it wouldn't be a genocide, but we kind of skip over and gloss over what happened in the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia.
Yeah, yeah, and it's
Policing
starting to happen
always
here.
leads to tens of millions, and not minimizing what happened in World War II, but 60 to 66 million people were killed during the
Yes,
Bolshevik Revolution, and many of them Christians. And it was directed at faith because you can't get people to put their faith completely in the government, which is what you have to do in order to have a communist revolution, if people have faith in the creator. And so these words do get thrown around a lot. And I think the one thing that I would say is, um, and again, I'm not trying to believe in the dichotomy of left versus right, but almost all of these, fascism, Nazism, are all socialist in nature and are all about government control and
yep.
not about free market and freedom and those kind of things. I worry. I try not to worry. I think about the fact that what I really see happening right now is some kind of technocratic oligarchy that we seem to be moving towards in this country, using a surveillance state.
Yeah, yeah. But I think Google just kind of blew the whistle on that the other day, though. They're warning of an AI tech bubble, and I actually I actually don't think so. Technology is not as great as people like to believe it is, but the people that are most delusional about it are the people that are heads of these tech companies. Elon Musk, like I love the guy. I think he's awesome. He creates the coolest rockets on the planet that I've ever seen. I'm a big space buff. So I was an Elon Musk fan before he was cool. Um, but he's delusional. He's delusional. If he thinks the AI is the answer, I don't think AI is as good as they think it is. I really don't. And when it comes to um, technology as a whole, there's a problem with technology, and it is that when countries are fighting each other, what's the first thing to go? Technology. And we all have to, we're all learning right now in 2025, we're all learning how to go backwards because we keep getting hit with cyber attacks or there's a bug in the system. So the internet's down for a whole day. And that's happened twice just this year. There was a bug and the internet was down for an entire day and the entire country flipped out.
Yeah,
So
because Amazon Web Services went down, and yeah.
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
well, I agree, and I um I do have, I still think that there are challenges with AI that, I think we need to be more cognizant of. And
Yeah, absolutely.
part of what, I mean, right now, like right down the road, they're laying so much cable because they're building a data center, you know, 5, 10 miles from me.
It's a
And
giant waste of money. They're throwing money in a hole in the ground is what they're doing. It's a giant waste of money, and none of it's going to help anybody. And
no, and it will eliminate jobs and people. I mean, if your goal is to get everybody on a universal basic income, because you've heard Elon Musk even talking about that, you mentioned him, and he's like, but it will be a very generous, it will be a
yeah,
universal generous income because
which is why
AI will
he's
be
worth a
doing
trillion
everything.
dollars, right? I mean, that's exactly the reason why he's worth $1 trillion, right? It's sickening, like, and it's delusional to think that we could have a universal basic income that high, right? It's ludicrous because, like, what are people going to do? People have to have a purpose. People like, and I think that's a big part of what's wrong right now with the younger generations is they don't have a purpose. It's gotten so expensive to live, right? That they go to work, they come home, and they play on their phones all that's their entire existence. None of them are happy, none of them are active, and they are all mad at the man, but yet they want to give the man more power.
It's very, very diluted. It's programmed. They have been indoctrinated in school to believe that if you just give government more power, all the problems will get solved by government, which has created all the problems in the first place.
Right.
And they have been programmed. I mean, this goes back to also like where I started talking about how they don't live in the same reality. Because the other thing is that we've basically been at war, even though we've never declared war since World War II. Per the Constitution, Congress has never declared war. They authorized the use of force after 9/11, right? To combat terrorism, and that's how we've been doing all the conflicts we've been in, all the droning, bombing, all of it. But we have been at war since a lot of them were born. They haven't seen, a peaceful, united nation, and I don't mean the United Nations, I mean a peaceful America in which, and people stop doing things in a community,
Yeah.
Never been a fan of organized religion in my past, at all. But church used to be a great way that people who didn't think alike got together, and they didn't know what your politics were because there wasn't social media where you're blasting it all over the public. You didn't know who made that great Jello salad at the church picnic, who they voted for, and you didn't care because they made a great, Jello salad or whatever it was. And people used to be on bowling leagues together, and people used to I used to have a dinner club I was a part of where we'd rotate houses and we'd all get together and everybody'd bring a dish and we have a theme and we'd get together all the time. Well, people don't do that as much anymore. And
Right.
so all people see is what is online about people. And it's an ugly place, especially because, I mean, and I get into this in the book quite a bit because I have two chapters called Tools of Control. One is education, and the other one is called um, censorship and propaganda. Um, and if you didn't know it, all of mainstream media has been controlled for a very long time by our intelligence agencies. Started with Project Mockingbird. If anyone listening hasn't looked into it, please do. It's alive and well. It's why they all say the same thing at the same time, using
Yes.
the same word. And it's not just mainstream media. It's in our movies, in Hollywood. It's in our television programming. And all of the internet infrastructure was created by our intelligence agencies and specifically mostly DARPA.
Yep.
Okay. Um, and all of them use these algorithms to conscious, constantly feed us things that are going to divide us and infuriate us. And
Yeah,
so the image that these young people have of the quote unquote other side has been fed so much by these algorithms, and they don't ever interact in person with people who
right.
don't think like they do. So it makes it really easy for them to demonize us. It makes it
And
really easy.
yes, it makes it easier to dehumanize us. And
Uh-huh.
that's a very good point, and I talk about that all the time, which is one of the reasons why I started this podcast in the first place, is to have interactions just like this. I'm looking at you and having a conversation with you and understanding that you are a person just like me. And that's we don't have that connect on the internet. It's not there for social media, and that's why people feel so comfortable spouting hate and discontent on the internet and not in real life, because they might get punched in the face. And
Well, there aren't. So it's funny because on the one hand, I'm 100% against cancel culture. I'm 100% against all of that. That doesn't mean that you're free from consequences of your actions, right? Like if you say something that your employer thinks will cost him or her business, I
that's
think
the
they
free
should,
market. Yeah,
that's the free market. Um, but there are so few consequences for online behavior. And I support it because part of what woke me up is that I'm a free speech absolutist. I
absolutely.
you can to me, hate speech laws of any kind are completely unconstitutional.
Absolutely.
I can say the most hateful thing about any group, any group. I don't care who you are. I That's my protected right. Now, it doesn't free me. That's just the government can't create a law that prevents that. Doesn't free me from the consequences of it. If my employer sees that and says, "Hey, I'm not going to hire you because I I get a lot of business from that community
Right.
that you just threw under the bus," that is a perfectly rational, reasonable consequence of that hate speech that I just spewed. Um, but I do think that the lack of personal interaction, and that our young people are to the point that like their online lives are more important to them, more real in some ways than
Yeah.
real life relationships, is a really big challenge, for how we maintain our humanness and our
Yeah.
connectedness going forward. And part of what I recommend if someone's trying to wake up is to get offline. Go find someone, go to a meeting of a group that you disagree with and go actually talk to people, you
That's where that
know?
saying "go touch some grass" comes from, is because people have gotten so out of touch with reality that they believe that online is their life, and they don't have any life. Like I've come across so many people like that in my everyday dealings with people, that they don't seem to understand that they can shut that shit off. I when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I had to back away for like 2 weeks. I got behind in the podcast. I still haven't gotten caught back up yet. It takes me forever to reach back out to people because I'm overwhelmed by the amount of hate that people have for each other without understanding why they have that hate. And it comes down, like you were talking about, control and DARPA and the algorithms. I don't think these tech bureaucrats were aware of what was happening until it was brought to the attention, like until the was it the Twitter files, until that became like mainstream. I don't think they realized that they were being played. And so, Mark Zuckerberg, the guy from Facebook, and the Jack Dorsey from Twitter, and I think those type of people, they didn't understand what was happening, as they just knew that they were making money hand over fist, right? And that's where the algorithms came from, is selling a shit and
Well, and
consumerism.
collecting our data to sell it
Yes.
as well.
And
But
I
here's
still
the
don't
thing.
think data is that big of an issue. I don't think data is that big of that important, but because it's been weaponized, right? It has become that big of an issue. I don't give a shit who has my data, but because it's been weaponized, now I do care.
Yeah, and in part because our Fourth Amendment pretty much has ceased to exist. But
Yes.
an interesting thing about Facebook, which I found out when I was researching for the book, is um, that DARPA actually shuttered a program called LifeLog the day before Facebook was launched. And the whole idea of LifeLog was going to get all your pictures, all your anniversary, all your data. And so I think DARPA just gave it to Zuckerberg, and whatever happened, I don't know what happens when these intelligence agencies do these things exactly, but, and I can't point you to a smoking gun contract or anything like that. It's just very suspicious. It was because the Total Information Awareness Program had just gotten called out, and so they shut LifeLog down. But then our favorite, my favorite, tech bad guy right now, Peter Thiel, which we could get into a whole other conversation, was one of the first people on Facebook's board. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of in his hands, with the CIA and everything like that. So it's all like I basically say to people, like, if you are saying something on a social media platform, just know that the people in the government know everything you're saying. They did not give this technology away to private interests, to not maintain control of the data and have their ways of knowing. And so, you know, our reality that we live in is a very carefully constructed, controlled reality that our intelligence agencies and they want us to have. And so, if you look at the algorithms, like one of the things I also really talk to people about in the book is like, try searching on a different search engine than Google and see what the difference is in what some of the results are. Google deprioritizes things that, or flat out blocks them. But basically, I think 97% of internet searches last I saw were on Google. And
I think
I think
Google was invented by DARPA, if I remember correctly.
yeah, they all were. That's the thing. If you go back through and look at who funded them, and here's what I say to people: if you're trying to wake up, question everything, because the very first thing that your indoctrination and programming does to you is get you not to ask questions. If an expert said it, you just trust it. If the government told you, you
Yeah.
just trust it. So question everything. And the second thing is follow the money. And I think we saw this with Doge and USAID. Where did the money come from? Who paid for it? Who benefits from it? And where does the money go? And sometimes you have to follow through three or four shell companies or organizations and that kind of thing. But if you start asking questions and following the money, your eyes are gonna be open to a
Oh
lot of things
yeah.
that you took for granted. So
Oh yeah. I'm actually a fan of some of that stuff because I mean, uh okay, so our intelligence agencies are doing it. So trust and believe that Russia's intelligence agencies, China's intelligence agencies, I mean, even France's intelligence agencies are doing the same thing. So I am actually a fan of some of those things. Have you ever heard of Yuri Bezmenov?
I had the name, yes, rings the bell. Is he the one who was talking about how you would?
Ideological subversion.
Yes, yeah,
And
and
if
but
people go and listen to the interview that he did, I think it was back in the early 90s. If you look and listen to all that stuff, he's talking about what's happening today, and our education system. This is so hard for me to say without sounding like an asshole, but if people remember what our education system was designed for, and we go back to that, we'd be a lot happier. I think the problem is that the indoctrination started in the 90s, right? I think when the fall of the Soviet Union happened, probably working on it before the 90s. Um, but they got into our education system and they started indoctrinating. Um, and we've always been, our education system has always been there for like indoctrination and stuff and do what the government says. It's always kind of been that way. But then the ideological subversion started happening, and we can trace it back to the 80s and 90s. And when that started happening, the people growing up into that education system were being educated. And where are those people now? You look at where those people are now that were brought up during that time, they are our educators. And that's how 1 to 2 generations we were all being raised to think communism might be a good idea again. And it's absolutely not. It's at the people at the very top are the people who benefit, while the people at the bottom suffer. And we have an income, like a wealth gap now, and it's becoming a war of the classes, and it's only getting wider because of these policies. Now, if we go back to 1970, and when education was there to churn out factory workers, that's what the American education system was designed to do. It was designed not to educate you, not to not to make smarter people. It was made and invented to make little manufacturing machines out of people. And if we go back to that and tell people, listen, you are not in school to learn. You are in school to learn how to be a person, learn how to be a productive member of society, to learn how to serve us, not you, us. If we go back to that and tell people exactly what they're doing, exactly why they're going to school, a lot of educators still in 2025 believe that their job is to educate, and it is not their job to educate. Their job is to regurgitate and make us compliant. And without, it's hard to say that shit without sounding like an asshole, that we need to go backwards and rediscover why schools are great in the first place. We need manufacturers, we need builders, we need people who can make computers. We need really smart people, not because of education, but because we need them to manufacture shit so we can have money.
Yeah, I mean, we need to, and this is what I was starting, I think, to get at it before, is that we're not having the conversation about how AI is going to change everything. We didn't
Yeah.
have a conversation about how globalization would gut our economy. And, and then the joke was, oh, well, you can just learn to code, right? And now, um, I mean, as bad as AI may end up being at certain things, I think that the coders are writing themselves right out of jobs,
I,
like,
I just had that conversation with my 16-year-old the other day. He said he wanted to be a coder. And I said, well, you're going to have to pick a different job. And he said, why? I want to learn how to code. And I said, well, it's very simple, son. It's because AI already writes code better than anybody. Anybody writes code. So you won't have a job. If you
I
want, if you want to be a coder, learn how to code the AI. And
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And so, we need to, I say this all the time, we need to get back to a place where we as a country make things and
yes.
know how to fix things and how to innovate. And, you know, I, people like, bravo to you that you're going to be homeschooling. I think, and I would advise that to anybody. Get your kids
It's
out of.
It's not because I want to. Let me get that straight. It's not because I want to. I don't want to educate my kids. I never wanted that. I'm the type of parent that wants them to get the hell out during the day and come back in the evening and we'll have a great time together. I never wanted my kids to be homeschooled. But because they're going to school and they're not learning shit. They're not learning anything.
No. And
Um
that's
my
that's why, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
my 6 year old, he can't read yet. I mean, he does have level 2 autism, but there's, they're supposed to be learning how to read in kindergarten. and he's in the first grade and he can't read yet. And it pisses me off because while he does have level 2 autism, he has the capability and the language to learn how to read. And it's very sad that I I'm full disclosure, I'm an eighth, I don't have any further than eighth grade education. I dropped out in high school, and the last grade I successfully completed was the eighth grade. Um, I do have my GED, but that's neither here nor there. My my son learns more at home from us than he ever does at school. Now, he learns coping skills and learns how to do reading, writing, and arithmetic somewhat, but he learns more interacting with us and having us teach him than he does in a school, and it's mind blowing to me.
Which I'm sorry that that's, the case, but I think it is the case that schools have gotten so far away from teaching skills that actually matter.
Yes,
Home ec, shop. We used to have good, tech high schools where, what they did is get us to value one type of intelligence and one type only, and then prop those people up. And I'm a prime example of that. It's all about, can you memorize what we tell you to and regurgitate it in the way we want you to?
exactly.
And it's not about being
They're not teaching
creative.
them how to think. They're teaching them what to think.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you actually exhibit independent thinking skills, you get in trouble. You're going to the principal, you may
Yep,
be getting put on,
that was me.
ADHD drugs, like all of that. So like that's why I say good for you, sadly, but good for you, because I encourage anyone to homeschool, and I encourage them to talk to their kids about learning a trade, figuring out what you can do with your hands. You know, um, once the AI revolution happens, whatever that means, if you know how to fix stuff or build stuff, you're going to be fine. If all you are able to do is what you would call the laptop class, or, a white collar person, there's going to be no need for you. Why would you want an accountant when AI can do your taxes in 2 minutes for free? Why would you
Absolutely.
want a lawyer when AI can, and I'm a recovering attorney, I like to say, and I'm done practicing because I practiced enough. But why would you want a lawyer doing your research for you about case law when I mean,
It is so
really,
fast. It is so fast. AI,
exactly.
even right now, right now, it is so fast. Helping me research for a case that I had. Um, so I could be my own lawyer. Helping me do that research was all my research was completed in about 3 hours. And I didn't have to open a book. The only thing I had to do was trust but verify kind of thing. I had to verify what AI was telling me was actually true. Now, there was a few instances in there that it was questionable, but I won my case.
Well, congratulations. Yeah, but I just think the future is that all these people who have spent all this time in school, there may be a place for people who are sort of supervisory or at the top of it, but all those entry level positions are going to be AI. They're just not going to be needed. And so, like, thinking about that and having a real conversation about it, and I 100% agree with you that we really need to think about purpose and meaning. And, for so
Yeah.
many young women, I'd encourage them to think about what could possibly be more meaningful than having a family. What
There
could
you go.
possibly be more meaningful than raising good, moral humans? What's
Now
going to have more of an
that's
impact?
real feminism. That's real feminism, in my opinion.
I agree with you. And, again, I already said I don't have my feminist card anymore, but, to me, so much of what feminism actually was misogyny. It was about making women feel bad about our natural instincts and hormones and
Well,
our,
look at when it happened. Look at when it happened in the Industrial Revolution, right? Women left the home. and went to work. And um, it really got really bad after World War II because all the men died and women had to come out and support their whole families on an income. They had to go to work. And I
Well,
think,
and then the government got to double tax, right? So now they're
yeah,
getting more of
yeah,
our money. And like being kind and soft and nurturing and all the things that women are supposed to be. I mean, not every feminist is like this, but third wave feminists, whew, um, they really are. But it's about being more like a man,
yeah.
And I have a conversation with young women or even young men about, oh, there's no, it's not a feminine energy to be soft. What? Like, and I say this too, and I have no problem saying this. Like, if I'm in a building and it starts on fire, I do not want a female coming in to try to carry me out. I want a big burly man who's, gonna carry me out with like throw me like a sack of potatoes as opposed to a woman who's struggling. And
Yep.
that's
And
not because
there's
no.
nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having that opinion either. I think, it goes back to the hoity-toity virtue signaling that you were talking about, that the left, oftentimes we see it more on the left than we do the right. Um, there's all kinds of virtue signaling going on where, they have the moral high ground. Like, who gave them the authority to have the moral high ground in the first place? I didn't. But for me, thinking about feminism, I think the feminists have it backwards. If if you were really advocating for women and women's rights, you would say, no, women don't belong in the workplace. We belong at home raising the kids. And putting women up on a pedestal and not down here where the men are. It's like it's very hard to get my feelings across about this because I have so many beliefs on the. I grew up when my mom was a single mom most of the time, and she worked her ass off, and she went to school at the same time, and she raised me to believe that women can do just as much as men can do, which is true. Most of the time, women are just as good as men at many things. But there's one thing that women do really well, and men just suck at it. And it's being a mom. It's being a mom. And being a dad is the best thing that I've ever done in my entire life. And I would love if my wife could afford to have that feeling. But right now, she, like, out in the workforce, out in the real world, she's worth more money than I am. I can't make as much as she can because I don't have that piece of paper saying I'm educated, though I am twice as smart as the people I come across. Um, if feminists were really smart, they'd be advocating for it to go the other direction. Let the either parent, it doesn't matter, mom or dad, stay home with the kids. That's the most important thing because this is the future generations that we're raising up here, and we got to make them good people. And I think a big part of the issue with young people right now, they have no direction, and that's because mom and dad aren't home. They either have a single parent family or mom and dad are both at work. And it's just you need both parents to run a good home.
I 100% agree with you. And I would say that, part of the challenge that we face too is, shout out to single moms. It's hard and, you have to work hard. But you, a mom can never raise a boy to be a man, no matter what, as good as she is at everything, as good as women are, you can't teach a boy what it means to be a man. And we have a lot of very weak men as a
Absolutely.
result that were raised by single moms. And it is not, I mean, so I think that, um, it's gotten to the point where like, you can't even say men are physically stronger without people like calling you, misogynistic. And it's the exact
Absolutely.
opposite. It's like there are facts about biology that, evolved over, hundreds of thousands of hundreds of years, thousands of years, and we're fighting against it, and we're saying it's not true. And what we've really done is make both men and women go against their nature in
Yeah.
order to fit into these new societal roles. And it doesn't work well. I saw the saddest like little video the other day. And it was this young woman, college age, talking to someone who was pro-life. And the pro-life person, she's like, yeah, I had an abortion. I'd do it again, and was like so proud of, basically killing her child.
Yeah.
And not
And
only
there's something so sinister about that. I oftentimes wonder where that came from. Like, how did we get to the point where abortion is talked about the way it is? And
oh, it's been that is a huge brainwashing thing. We've made young women believe that the worst thing that could happen to them is that they raise a child, that the worst thing that could happen. Now, what she said next was even sadder to me. She was maybe 21, maybe it seemed, and she said that she was going to get sterilized very soon. And then she said, "Why would I want to bring a child onto a dying world?" This is the outlook that we are creating for young people. The fake climate alarmism,
yeah,
everything is horrible, and the disconnection from nature and what God created, or the creator, however you envision that, the beauty of the world that is outside of your window looks very dull when you're bathed in blue light all day and all you do is stare at a screen. So
yeah,
touching grass, get out there. Like, it's really hard to stand on the side of a mountain. I'll relate the story. I was in Colorado one time and was going hiking, crested over the top of, like a little hill on the Rockies, and there was this valley covered in wildflowers, covered in butterflies. And as I crested over the top of the hill, the butterflies took flight and they were all around me, every color of the rainbow. Nothing can compare to that. But our children are not seeing that. They're not, what they're seeing is the horrible, constant fear feed that, comes um onto their screen. And like, the other thing that has just been really hard for me to sort of uh reconcile is part of what we've done to young women in making them think that they need to be more like men is encouraging a complete lack of respect for their own body.
yeah.
And when I hear them talking about body counts and then they talk about what those body counts actually are, and then wonder why like a good man might not want to marry them or whatever, I'm just kind of like, it's really sad to me. It's like, I'm not saying we should go back to shaming because I don't think we should.
Right,
There'd be a
right,
respect for a woman to make her choices.
right.
But
And I feel the same way. Like everybody has their place. Like, so I don't think we should go back to shaming either, because I think are people too. Like, and we need them, and just like they need us. And it's a very cool ecosystem. Like, I think of it like Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, you know, we have to have both. And I think I think that when talking about body counts and all that stuff doesn't really matter to me all that much. Now, if we're talking we're talking about, triple digits or something, like we've been around, like I might have an issue with that, but
I'm
for the
talking
most
about,
part, yeah, bragging about it, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
sort of the idea that, but I think it goes hand in hand with the sort of callousness that a lot of the younger women view abortion with. It's like, well, I'm just going to sleep around, and if I happen to have a oopsie, I'm just going to get rid of it.
Right,
And it's
right.
sort of all in that same mindset, as opposed to, I was raised to believe, that sex should be something that you share with someone you love, and your body is a gift that you give to someone, and some sort of specialness around it. And it's not like I said, if you want to go sleep with everybody, more power to you. Be
What
safe.
gets me is what gets me is the people that say like Charlie Kirk had those same views, that we shouldn't be that way. Um, but there's a certain subset of people that would call him violent for having those opinions, just opinions, and voicing those opinions. He was violent. And that's a big part of the reason why I had to disconnect from social media and all that stuff for a while, because I was seeing all these things that I know aren't true. I didn't know Charlie Kirk personally, but like the things that he said about abortion and pro-life, and like we shouldn't kill little kids. What about that doesn't make sense? What about that is violent, that we shouldn't kill babies?
It's not, but they have convinced, and the chapter on education goes into this, especially at college. There's a lot that has gone on to um, indoctrination involves restricting access to different viewpoints, and there's so much that's one of the steps. Repetition, there are a number of steps which I outline in the book. But the restriction of opposing viewpoints is a big one. So they are surrounded only by people who believe that way. And they have safe spaces, which, do you know what those are?
Yeah.
Only people of a certain group are allowed. I think the only group that could not get a safe space is white
Which
men.
and thusly it like takes away the whole idea that it's a safe space, because it's not for everyone.
No, it's just for, black people, or it's just for gay people, or whatever it is. Trauma
I'm actually
warnings.
against gun-free zones. I'm against gun-free zones. I think that a big part of the problem with churches and schools being shot up is they're easy targets.
Well, I 100% agree with you on that. I used to be very anti-gun until I woke up and understood that every society, before they completely repress everyone's rights, they disarm them. And it's not, and if you only look at what's going on in our friends across the pond, as they say in the UK, with 10,000 people being arrested for online speech last year. Um,
Yeah.
they disarmed them, and that's what happened. So I think, I worry about that, because freedom of speech is the last thing they go after they take away the guns, right? Our
Yeah.
First and Second Amendments are the only things keeping us as free as we are, even though I think we're so far from what true freedom is at the moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so them saying that speech in and of itself can be violence is very concerning to me. It is not, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I
Yeah.
guess that what they teach young kids now, I don't know if your son has heard this, but sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will last forever.
Yeah. No,
You
I don't,
control
I've not
people's
heard that one.
speech, and you control their minds. And that's at the base of it. If I can no longer um, speak for myself and decide what is true, then I am lost.
So much
So
like you, I'm a free speech absolutist, and I would never, if my kids come home and told me that, I don't know, I might overreact, but I would tell them, like freedom of speech is freedom of thought, right? We start controlling people, we start controlling speech. At that point, we start controlling thoughts, and we see it happening already with self-censorship on the internet. And because you and I have to watch what we say, or we'll get demonetized off of YouTube, or we'll get pulled off of another platform, or it sucks. It really sucks. And by controlling our words, they are then controlling the way we think.
well, and that is in the chapter on the evolution of the progressive cult. This all started with political correctness, and it's where we find ourselves, and it's straight out of Mao's playbook for the Cultural Revolution in China to communism.
Actually, yeah, yes, it's a very communist. I think. Let me look up just to make sure that I'm not lying. But I believe the term politically correct, I believe that originally originated in Russia.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. There was a Chinese one too, and well, the Bolshevik Revolution was before the Chinese Cultural Revolution, so
Right.
it may have been borrowed there, but it definitely was. I see a lot of parallels between
The
what,
phrase was borrowed from translation of Chinese communist texts. So you were right.
yeah, it was. And so none of us stopped to ask, where did this come from? But it's straight. So I think we're facing like that. Plus, it's very Orwellian, right? It's wrong think, it's wrong, it's double speak, it's all of that stuff. So, part of why I wrote the book is to have these conversations. And I'm 100% with you. The more that you talk to people who don't think like you, the harder it is to dehumanize them and other them. And the more that we think about what we have in common instead of what they're trying to constantly divide us over, left versus right, man versus woman, white versus black, gay versus straight, all of those things. What do we have in common? And you're my neighbor first. You're my fellow human first before you are whatever else you are. Um, and the better chance we have to sort of save our republic, because the more they divide us, the harder it becomes for us to maintain the constitutional foundation of our country. And so that's a lot of why I wrote the book. And I'm hoping that it can help, and having these conversations helps too.
Absolutely. And like I know like a lot of people, so I have conversations on both the left and the right. As we started the conversation, I let you know that I'm kind of politically homeless. Yes, I did vote for Trump. I voted for Trump in 2020 and 2024. I voted for Hillary in 2016. So or 2017, whatever year it was.
16. Yeah, it was
Um,
16. Seems like another lifetime ago before COVID, as a matter of
and
fact.
I
But
voted for Obama and I voted for Bush twice. So it's no, I didn't. I voted for Bush once. But for me, it's we talk about politically homeless and stuff like that, and the right and left. Did you know that our government was never designed to have a right and left? It was designed to have, like at the very beginning, it was designed to be a one-party system.
well, yeah, our founders warned about factions, and they warned about one of the biggest things that could cause the fall of our republic was factions. And
Divide and conquer.
yeah, exactly. And they would be mortified at the parties and the way that the parties tried to divide us. And so and one of the things that they said, I think it's Federalist in Federalist Paper 10, Madison said, a well-functioning government can suppress factions. And in fact, it should try to do that. And our government does the exact opposite. They are constantly pointing the finger at the other guy. And the reason why you're not getting your SNAP benefits is the other party, or the reason why, you're so
We could go on a whole different tangent about SNAP benefits and all that stuff. Like I have to have you on again because like I
okay.
know we're running out of time.
We
Um,
are, and I am sorry, but I hate to say this, but I have to go to the bathroom really
oh,
badly
no
too.
worries, no
So,
worries. I'm on my second pot of coffee, so me too. But I have got to have you back on and like listen, uh this would be actually a good great point to pause this conversation and start it up again
okay,
on a different day. And what I'll do is I'm going to write you. I'm going to go take a little break and then I'll come back and I'll write you an email and I'll put my phone number in there and look, we can talk over text and everything because I hate email. But uh, I have to get you back on the schedule again because this conversation, while it has been a great one, it's been kind of all over the place. And what I would like to do is really I'd like to dive into some of these subjects individually and talk more about them. And you seem like a great person to do this with because number one, you were on the left and now you're more in the middle. And I am, if I had to pick a side right now, it would be right. So
Me too.
two minds that like we think alike, but I don't want to push anyone out of the conversation. So right and left, um, we'll just have like a centrist conversation about our beliefs and where the country is going, where it was, and like a lot of these topics, like we could talk about a screen addiction with children and all that good stuff. Like I could talk about that for hours because I have screen addicted kids. So
I'm
I,
screen addicted. My
me
screen
too.
addiction is different than everyone else's. I live on a farm and I have to force myself to get outside, you know, and um I mean, you talk about, drug addictions. This is a dopamine addiction, just like any drug addiction is that we
Yes.
have. And TikTok is the worst. Oh my God.
I
TikTok.
don't I don't have TikTok, but I'm hopelessly addicted to YouTube and like Facebook Reels and that kind of stuff. But I find myself more often than not um just having a podcast on in the background while I'm reading information or paying attention to other screens and stuff. I don't have the problem of forcing myself to go outside. I have a problem forcing myself to come in.
Well, when I get outside, I love it out there. Unless, and this is a whole other topic, unless they're spraying heavy, and then I hate being outside, but that's a whole other thing, which we could get into if you want to. But yeah, I'd be happy to come back and have more conversations, and we'll follow up. I mean, one of the things I think we could talk about and really kind of get into a lot of this with is what was the vision of our founders for our country, and how can we get back to it? Because the reason I find myself on the right now, if I had to pick, I'd say on the right, is I want to conserve our constitutional republic. And
So
so if that makes me a conservative, then I am one.
I take it you've read Project 2025.
Yes, I
And
have.
do you agree with about 90% of it?
There's a lot I do agree with. Yeah, I think where I kind of sometimes follow, here's the thing. I don't want I want the federal government to go back to what the founders wanted, and that is
Absolutely.
basically to secure our borders and represent us internationally and allow us to trade with one another in a way that makes us economically powerful.
And
And
that's
that's
exactly what
it.
government was. That's exactly the purpose of a government. Exactly the purpose. Not no none of this SNAP benefits or
If
like
if a state wants to create a food security program, I think they very well should. And they'd probably do a much better job of creating one that actually meets the needs of their own citizens in that state, because every state is so different and all of that. And
and then the systems keep getting better and better because they have to compete with each other.
well, and which of our founders called states the laboratories of innovation? And right, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Learning, I can't remember. Maybe it was no, I can't remember. But basically, if Illinois finds a really good way to do something and they do it for Illinois, then other states can adapt it for that state, but taking into account, hey, we have a lot more rural folks than Illinois does, or vice versa. And so how do we adapt it? But trying to create one size fits all rules for 340 million people who have essentially 50 different economies with different natural resources and different industries, and different economics makes no sense.
absolutely.
It really doesn't. And so I would be happy to come back and do that, and we can have more conversations. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and
Me too.
um, I think one of the greatest things, like one of the reasons that waking up was so hard is I've lost almost all of my old friends, but I have to say that the new ones that I've met have made it a lot easier, to deal with that. And also, um, to be able to just speak truth to people. And even when we don't agree, I can, go, okay, we're going to agree to disagree. I don't think you're a bad person because you don't think 100% like
Yeah.
me. And if you're on the left and in that progressive cult, that's what happens.
Well,
If
see,
you
I'm even able to be friends with like people that are in the progressive cult. Like I I really don't give a shit that much. Like identity politics piss me off because people make it all about like it's their entire identity. So like, man, it's I can be friends with just about anybody. I can have a good conversation with just about anybody. I could have conversations with communists all the time. Like, one of my good friends is a natural born Russian, and he immigrated here. And he's not a communist. He doesn't believe in communist ideals, but like those, we can have conversations about that kind of stuff. And I can disconnect from my feelings enough to have an intelligent conversation about different topics that I don't have to have my feelings in it at all. And so I think that's why I am so open and available to have great conversations with just about anybody, is because I can disconnect my feelings from it.
well, one book I read after I woke up, and then we can wrap up. So we both don't have an issue,
So we don't
but
sit sitting in a puddle.
yeah, exactly. But there's a book called The Four Agreements, and it's Toltec wisdom. It's an ancient Mexican, like from the Mexican era. But um, it's all about how we're sort of born into agreements of our society and the world, and we sort of follow them. And one of the new agreements that you're supposed to make for yourself is not to take things personally. And that's a really hard one, but 99% of the time when someone is reacting, it's not about you. It has nothing to do with you. It's about them. It's about their own beliefs. It's about reconciling their own view with what's being said. Um, don't take things personally. And so I really I do my best, which is another one of the agreements. Do your best. Some days your best is going to suck. Other days your best is going to hit it out of the park. But always know if you're doing your best, that's the best you for the day. Um, don't take, I do my best not to take it personally. And one of the biggest things that freed me is, it's not that I want to be mean or anything like that, but I really don't care what you think of me. If I tell you something that is true, and that makes you mad, that's on you. And I'm here, you know, I'm here in love and compassion and respect, for everybody. And And if that doesn't get returned to me, okay, but it's not about me. That's about you. And I'm gonna do my best to continue to spread love and compassion and respect. And so that's
Awesome.
that's sort of where I'll end it for our conversation for today.
Awesome. It's been a great conversation again, and that is a great place to leave it and hang out with me for just a minute, and we'll let these guys go. Hey,
Okay.
if you guys have listened this far in, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for joining Lisa and I in this great conversation. We're going to do it again in the future, but until then, if you liked it, like, subscribe. See you next time. Bye.